I have to think a little bit about this because in terms of cases, we can't talk too much about how those cases ultimately got decided, but I think some of the cases speak for themselves in terms of looking at factors in making decisions around women's stories, let's say. And often, like for an example, there was a case at the court which involved an accused who was convicted of sexual assault of two women in a building. And this building consisted of many women in the building. It's just that two people were raped. And one of the questions that the defense continually raised was, if this accused was such a rapist, why didn't he rape other women? And we only have two women making these complaints. So therefore there was something suspicious about that. And one of the things the decision said was that if you understand the crime of sexual violence, and certainly understand it from a control, an issue of control, then in this particular situation, in order for this accused to maintain control over all the women in this building, he picked the perfect two victims. One was the most powerful woman and one was the most vulnerable woman. And if he made each of those, if he attacked each of those, then he got all the other women, you know. And it really wasn't about his sexual needs or anything like that. It was really about using violence to ultimately control a situation. And I think so if you look at those kinds of decisions and the reasoning behind that, I think it's pretty clear that those decisions and other decisions at the court show the influence, I think, of perhaps how women approach those situations that might be confusing to people who aren't women, I guess, you know, because I think women understand that. You know, we intuitively understand where we're the most vulnerable, and so that's an example. I think, you know, being a woman leader, it's important to exercise that, and there's so many different styles of leadership. But I've always thought that as a judge, you're already carrying a big stick. You know, you don't have to, you know, go around waving that big stick. And I think for sometimes when people think of judges, they think exactly that. We're sitting a little bit above everyone else, and we've got this bat in our hand. And I think for mentoring purposes, and there's so many young women in the profession, globally young women in the profession, that it's important to show them different styles of leadership. And that, yes, we have the bat, we know how to use the bat when we need the bat, but there's a lot of other ways to achieve your goal without necessarily perhaps a male model of leadership. Oh, I think we listen, you know. I think we, I mean, maybe it's our, I mean, you know, some people are frustrated working in an all-women environment because I think women need to be taken care of. We need to be told we're doing a great job. We need to be stroked. We need to be patted on the back a little bit. And I do think it's to men's credit that they don't necessarily need that and they can just go in and do their job. But I do think that taking care of each other is a big piece of that. and so that we can all keep working. I mean, this is tough stuff. I mean, doing the work of justice is not easy, and being surrounded by injustice all the time. And you know, once you've experienced injustice, you see it everywhere, I think. And a little bit, I mean, maybe I'm old-fashioned this, and I'm old enough to remember when women, everything was a struggle for a woman. And probably my mother would laugh hearing me say that, because I don't really know her generation's struggles. But I think we understand how we have to keep moving forward, and we have to bring other women with us. And hopefully by bringing other women with us, we're also bringing men with us, and everybody in the common humanity of us all, that we can, you know, we all need to just keep moving forward. You know, one other thing that I think that we do is, especially when in an international forum, I mean, the court that I worked in was a little bit different than the tribunals, where all the judges are more or less coming from different backgrounds but working together. I was in a specific court where we needed to help build the institution. And the buzzwords for that are transfer of knowledge. How do you do that? And I think many judges, it's just easier to do it yourself than to actually take the time to train people into doing things, or actually having people think for themselves and figure out how to do something with, and give them support. And the story I like to tell was when I first came to the court in Bosnia, one of the areas where they did not have a lot of experience with, and keeping in mind that these were very experienced professionals in a civil system. They had had a very functional court system in Yugoslavia, but they were just subject to a new code. And part of this code was developing systems that were new to them, so they didn't really quite understand how they could work or how they could work efficiently. So one area was house arrest. They did not have that as a concept before the war. And after the war, one of the conditions of release when someone was arrested and indicted was whether or not they could be released under conditions, and one condition was a type of house arrest. They had very little experience with that. So the predictable thing happened. We released somebody on house arrest, and about a week later this person became sick and needed to go to the hospital. So there was a knock on my door, my chambers door, and there was 3 very young women lawyers there, and they said, "Judge, we have this problem." And I said, "What is it?" And they said, "Oh, you know, this accused, you know, you ordered him to stay in his house, and now we got a call from the lawyer, and he's got to go to the hospital. And the law doesn't allow for a possibility of him to leave the house because you ordered him to stay in the house." And, you know, this was logical thinking for them, but it also was reflective, I think, of their legal background, which saw the law as answering all questions, as opposed to the law just giving you a guideline or a framework. I just looked at them and I said, "Oh, well, I guess he's going to have to die then. I mean, I have no idea. I can't help you out here." And they were, you know, there's this shocked look on their face, and I said, "Please, I'm really busy. I'm working on something else. You just need to go and leave, and I need to finish my work here." And they closed the door very respectfully, and I could hear them outside talking, and I was looking at my watch thinking, "Okay, guys, come on, you need to come back in here." And then I was getting a little worried to think that maybe they wouldn't come back in, but sure enough, there was this another timid knock. And one of the women came in and said, "Judge," and you'd have to understand that culturally they did not think they could challenge a judge. You know, that was just not done. And this woman said, her voice was literally trembling, and she said, "We don't think we could let him die." And I said, "Yes, of course you can't let him die." And I said, "Okay, now we're talking. So what are we going to do?" And they looked at me to say, "Well, what should we do?" And I said, "No, this is our problem now. We have a statute that doesn't allow for particular kinds of motions to be made. You don't have any experience with that. What are we going to do? What does the court want to see satisfied? What will make the court feel satisfied about this request? How can we grant relief? Let's figure out a system for this. And very quickly, they had lots of ideas. And they kept looking to me, and I kept saying, look, I don't know how your medical system works. I don't know how your hospitals work. I don't know how what your doctors, what they issue, what they're comfortable issuing. You need to come up with a system where somebody can petition the court for relief. We can grant that relief upon the filing of motions or documentation, whatever it is. I gave them kind of an overview of a structure. But you now need to go and figure it out. And like 3 hours later, they came back with the most beautiful set of forms and motions and responses, and they needed stamps. They're big on stamps, in the Balkans. What a doctor needs to file, what kinds of documentation an accused would have to produce in order for the court to grant this relief. And it was this great experience. But the most important thing is they felt so powerful about it. They felt that they had really solved a problem, and they did it in a professional way. And I mean, I could have done all of that in 10 minutes. I could have said, this is what we need to do, this is how we're going to respond, I'll draw the order up, I'll issue it. But instead we spent 4 hours of an afternoon, but that was it. It was done. I never heard that question again. And throughout the court, these forms were utilized and the system was put in place. And I think about that a lot. And I would say that some of my male colleagues, I particularly worked with my office mate. We shared offices at the time. Was from Finland, and he was like, "Wouldn't it be just easier to do it?" And I remembered saying, no, actually, it wouldn't be easier. This is a better way to do it. And I'm sure he's still puzzling about that. But I feel like, now there's another whole legacy out there.